Hey MCARBO Brotherhood, I'm really excited to introduce to you the KEL-TEC Sub-2000 aluminum trigger guard by MCARBO. Really excited that we finally came out with this. I do apologize to everybody else that's already purchased the trigger spring kit, and now finally the trigger guard. This will be the third time you've got to go into your Sub-2000. But I'm telling you, it's going to be worth it. And if you're just now looking at our products, I really suggest you get all three. So get the trigger guard, the trigger spring kit, which is going to reduce your trigger pull from about 10 pounds to 5 pounds, and the aluminum trigger, which is going to actually help with that trigger flex and all that nastiness when it feels like a really long trigger pull. Length of pull feels much longer. It's because that plastic trigger is flexing. And not to mention, trigger guard and the trigger, they're actually done with similar design. So you see the radius here, the chamfering on the sides, similar angles that we have here on the trigger as well. And these two pieces are actually anodized at the same time, so they're going to be matching. So it is kind of a nice look when you think about the aesthetics, but also the function. Now you've got a complete aluminum trigger guard, how it should be. You know, this is a critical component of the firearm. You know, you can get away with a lot of other plastic on the KEL-TEC, but when you think about it, these two pieces especially need to be aluminum. There's no beating around the bush there, and especially what we're doing with the aluminum trigger guard. I mean, we're using this as a lever half the time when we're trying to fold the barrel assembly. So a must-have, the aluminum trigger guard finally is here. We did make it wider, so this is one of the great benefits that we were striving for, was to make it wider so that it was more useful. You know, when you're trying to grab this guard, say with your thumb, and you're trying to fold the barrel assembly, it's just hard to get it. And you see those little knobs, like they're worthless. They're so small. So making it wider helped make it more complete. It just made more sense. And we made it smooth. We got rid of this rib here. This rib here is to reinforce the plastic. Well, with machined aluminum, it doesn't need any reinforcement. So this will provide a much more smoother shooting base. Or if you're using, you know, if you're using your rifle and say you're positioning it in a way where you've got a rest here and you're pushing up against that rest with your trigger guard, drive that rifle into your position and make it as steady as possible, you know, it's going to put wear on that, and you could potentially break it depending on how rough you are. And these are truck guns primarily, so they do bounce around in a truck. This would be a bad thing to break in a worst case situation. I just don't like it. You know, it's a critical part of the function of the firearm, and it's a very weak part of the firearm. So do a quick side by side. You can see the major difference there. And once we install it, you'll be able to really tell the major benefit, but you can kind of get the idea already that it's going to be a much nicer component than what's already in there. And this is the other cool thing. We wanted to make sure we corrected. You see this? Do you think that's good? I mean, that is really bad. Those tolerances are way off. So when you're using this lever, it's sliding back and forth. There's nothing that feels positive, or nothing that feels like you're ever really in control. And it's so flexible. Actually, I wanted to break this for the video. I don't think it's necessary. I don't think anybody wants to see me do that, but maybe you do. I definitely can't reshoot it if I do break it. So, you know, there's no breaking the aluminum trigger guard. The plastic, I don't know, you're taking your chances. So that's finally here, the aluminum trigger guard. We're really excited about it, and I hope you guys are too. Parts and tools needed for this build: the KEL-TEC Sub-2000 machined aluminum trigger guard by MCARBO, flathead screwdriver, needle nose pliers, small, medium, and large punch, a razor blade, a 2.5mm Allen key, 2 blocks of wood, and a hammer. Now, before we proceed, let's make sure we're wearing eye pro and follow along with me and make sure your firearm's clear. So we'll check the chamber, we'll check the bolt face, and we'll check the magazine well. This firearm's clear. Now let's begin by field stripping our KEL-TEC Sub-2000. Take your hammer and your large punch, place it here on the buttstock pin, give it a little tap. It's not going to hurt it. That pin is under some pressure, so it does help to do it this way. Remove the buttstock pin, remove the buffer, remove your buttstock, then pull back on the charging handle, remove your recoil spring, remove your charging handle, may help to assist your bolt out with your punch. Remove your bolt. Make sure you pay attention to the way this goes in. You can see the calipers there on the side, and it fits together like a puzzle piece. That'll be critical when we go to reinstalling it. And of course, remove the collar. Now there's a few ways to do this. You can take a punch and you can tap it loose. On the Gen 1 there's actually threads under there. On the Gen 2, like this model here, there are no threads and it's just Loctite. So it's a little more difficult to remove if you have a Gen 2. If you have a Gen 1, you should be able to just twist it off, or if you had a strap wrench, that would be useful too. But ideally we don't want to damage this collar or castle nut too much. So you can use a punch if you're delicate enough with it, or you could use a strap wrench. That would be probably the most ideal way if it works. Then you could also use a rag and channel locks and try going about that way. But we found that just the punch seems to work kind of best, just to kind of tap it loose. And then once it's tapped loose, you should be able to put some MAN on it and get that collar castle nut right off. Next, we need to remove all 10 screws that hold the trigger assembly together. Take your 2.5mm Allen wrench and go ahead and start getting to work. This is the most time-consuming process, but it's not too bad. One thing I want to point out is the screws that I have in this Sub-2000 here are not the stock screws. These are actually an upgraded version that we actually just created. They're a 12.9 class metric screw. If you're not familiar with the classes, metric classes, it's kind of like so standard bolt grades are grade 2, grade 5, grade 8. Metric bolt classes are class 8.8, class 10.9, and class 12.9. So a class 12.9 metric bolt would be similar to, say, a standard bolt grade 8, just to give you an idea. So these that I'm pulling out are the metric grade 8, if you will. They're also coated in black. They have a black oxide coating, which is great for corrosion protection, anti-galling. It even reduces light glare. And even aesthetically, I think they look better. They match kind of the deep, dark look of the Sub-2000. So I'll show you what the stock ones look like just for frame of reference. So here's an up-close look of the black oxide screws compared to the stock screws. You can see the difference right off the bat there. These are not coated in anything, just alloy steel. These are coated in black oxide. Give you that corrosive protection and also the anti-galling protection. Now let's flip it over, do the same on the other side. Now let's flip it over with the ejection side port facing up. Now grab your small, medium, and large punch. We're going to need that. So we're going to attack the cross bolt safety now. We're going to remove the C-clips on both sides. First, we're going to remove the C-clip on the ejection port side, which is the fire side. So the idea and strategy here is to take your small punch, position it the C-clip so that it's facing towards you. And so this is why we are wearing eye pro, because these little clips tend to fly off. So what you want to do is push these clips towards you, and hopefully the idea is they'll just kind of bounce off of you and land right back on your workbench rather than somewhere underneath your workbench. So it may fight you a little as far as just kind of spinning around. This thing does free spin a little bit, so it takes a little patience here, but it's not bad. There you go. So see how it just bounced. You heard it fly and it just bounced right off me, so that's exactly what we want. Alright, now we're going to flip it over to the other side, and there's a detent on this side actually, so you're going to reorient the rifle real quick so that the clip is facing towards me. Up, see? Well, you can push it all the way up, but just be careful, that detent will fall out, and just grab it if it does. And there's the second clip, and it flew off and bounced straight off me. So 2 for 2 in the clips. We didn't lose any of them. That's good. Now that we got the 2 C-clips and the detent out of the crossbolt safety, go ahead and flip your rifle around so the ejection port's facing up, and then we're actually going to collapse the rifle in 2. Now we're going to take our flathead screwdriver, starting at the top. We're going to work our way around the trigger assembly so that we can separate the 2 pieces. Trying to get an even amount of space all the way around. And then we're going to remove the top portion here. Set that aside. Go ahead and remove the magazine release as well. Now let's go ahead and remove the plastic trigger guard. All you have to do is just pull right up on it. That spring's going to pop loose. And let's compare quickly, side by side, what they look like and some of the differences. So you'll see on the left the MCARBO machined aluminum trigger guard, and then you'll see on the right here the factory plastic trigger guard. So you'll see some major differences in the intricacies here as far as the machined precision milling that's done here for the actual spring. The leg of the spring fits in there nice and snug. It's perfect. The tolerances are there, right where we want them. Whereas in this factory gaping hole here, it just kind of flops around loosely. And you'll see as we turn them together here. So there's a beautiful radius here on the MCARBO machined aluminum trigger guard, and it matches the actual radius on the sides of the target trigger. So that was something too that we took into account, is we wanted this to be a pair. We wanted the trigger and the trigger guard to be a matching set, and it is. So they're anodized simultaneously, and they've got a lot of the same machining characteristics between the 2 of them. So, and you'll notice here, let's look at this. So we know that the MCARBO machined aluminum trigger guard is going to be used as a lever, so we made it wider, and the idea was that you're able to easily grab it with your thumb as you're reaching with your you've got your hand on the actual pistol grip and you're trying to reach with your thumb to collapse the barrel assembly. It's much wider and even, and it's easier to find. It's more consistent, whereas the plastic trigger guard, it actually tapers, and it's wider up here and narrow down here, narrow in the place where you'd actually need it most. And to compromise, they kind of added these little knobs here, but they don't do anything. They're just really hard to find and easy to miss too. You're just, your finger fumbling all the time trying to get it. Here it's even, smooth, precise. It's tapered here nicely, nice chamfering on the sides, good radius, nice and smooth. We didn't want it to be blocky or sharp or anything like that. So we took real good care to make sure we made this as precise as possible. We wanted the tolerances to be nice and snug, but functional. So you'll notice too, once we get this in, it's not going to move side to side like the plastic one does. And the other major benefit is there's no rib in the middle. The plastic one has a rib because it needs the reinforcement. The machined aluminum trigger guard does not, and it makes a great shooting platform in the sense that if you're actually going to reinforce your supported position, you're going to maybe drive your trigger guard up against a wall or whatever you're shooting off of, it's going to be nice and smooth and flat, and it's going to be durable and strong, whereas a plastic trigger guard's got that rib in the middle. So it's kind of like teetering on one leg, it's just wobbling back and forth, whereas this is nice, smooth contact. So a lot of major advantages from aesthetics to function to tolerances with the machined aluminum trigger guard. Now let's put this thing in. It's real simple. All you have to do take the spring, find the long leg. So you may have to flip it around a couple times. There's a long leg. So we take the long leg. It's going to be at the bottom there. You see the short legs at the top, long legs at the bottom. We just drop it right in that little cutout, which is precise and a perfect fit for that spring. And then we're going to hold it with our fingers, right? We're going to keep it in there, hold it with our index finger. All right, and we're going to kind of just work that spring over this piece of polymer here and just try to avoid everything else. So keeping it in place, you're going to slide it down the post. You're going to get that good tension on it, and voila, that easy. Look at that. So you can see already, you can see the similarities between the trigger guard, this radius here, and the actual trigger radius. Real nice. So a matching pair, perfect fit. So now that we got our machined aluminum trigger guard installed, there's a few other things we have to do. So if you're a veteran with the Sub-2000 installation process, then you're quite familiar with the fact that the hammer has to be staged appropriately before we actually put it back together. So when we pull the two halves of the trigger assembly apart, it's going to actually make everything shift. So when it's under this sort of tension, the hammer is cocked back like that, the springs and everything are shifting. So just because the way these pins are set up, they have to actually they're held in place by both sides of the trigger assembly. So we need to stage the hammer once again. So that's why I recommended in the beginning, if this is your first time, go ahead and just get all three and put them in. I guarantee you're not going to be disappointed. As you read a lot of the reviews, a lot of guys have said, do it at the same time. I'm with you. For R&D, I pull this thing apart so many friggin' times, so it's unreal. I recommend it. And the good news is, though, you guys have done this 3 times. You're pros by now, so you could probably actually do this as a side business, installing these kits. So here you go. Pull out the crossbolt safety, set that to the side, and then go ahead and pull up on the trigger bar and let that just kind of relax itself. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to just remove the Sear spring, because this little baby will go flying. So just go ahead and pull up on that. And now you're just going to get your index finger on that hammer, push down on it, and then slowly release it. And now it's staged. So, and we'll double check. We'll kind of back that hammer off as we push down on the pin to make sure it's fully seated. Make sure that leg of the hammer spring is beneath the threaded stud. Make sure that it's not sitting on top of it, and we're staged appropriately. So now we're where we want to be. But the biggest thing is, if you had the trigger spring kit, you're pretty much already there. You could have easily done that. You could have done the trigger. So moving forward, we've staged it. Now let's go ahead and reset the tension on the trigger return spring. So I'll just pull it out for the sake of showing you guys in case this is your first time. So this is the trigger bar, this is the trigger return spring here, and this is the hinge pin. So the idea is the long leg of the trigger return spring is up top. You see that? So it's up top, short legs on the bottom as far as perspective on the hinge pin. So long legs on top, short legs on bottom. We want that long leg to rest against that tab. That's what creates tension. So just kind of keep your finger on it, keep it in place on that tab. Now we're going to set that hinge pin into the trigger, and this is kind of a neat trick too. So you can put the short leg right there like so, okay, on that trigger hinge pin. Now you take the trigger bar, simply wind it around. Instead of using your punch, you can just easily wind it into place rather than fight it with your punch. Kind of a trick that I learned after doing this so many times. There we are. And then we check it. So up and down, right? It goes up and down. That's what we want. And then forward, backward. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and reinsert the Sear spring. So long leg is going to go down behind the threaded stud here. Short leg is going to go right here on the Sear. And then the loop's going to go on the hinge pin. So try to do that simultaneously. Boom. Alright, so this long leg you can see is still kind of sticking out a little bit. You're going to want to just manipulate it into that space. You don't want to overshoot it though, but there you go. So it helps if you got your small punch there to kind of help you get it all in place. But that's the idea. locking that Sear spring in behind that threaded stud and between the polymer really makes it secure. So when you're going ahead and putting it all back together, it's not going to jump away on you. Now that all the linkage is properly in place, we're going to go ahead and take the mag release and we're going to drop that in position. Notice that little knob there, that's going to go right in like so, okay? And then take your empty magazine and insert that behind it. It's a great way to prop it up so that it doesn't fall down on itself. And then we're going to take the other side and we're going to reinsert that. Make sure that you've got your mag release spring still in place. Oh, the other thing, make sure this little long leg of the hammer spring is not riding on top of that threaded stud. That's going to really fight you if it is. Line up the holes. Alright, it's snapping together. That's what we want. Okay, can remove that mag now. Perfect. Now the easiest and most time-consuming part, putting all 10 screws back in, 5 on both sides. Flip it over and do the same on the other side. So now we need to go ahead and put the crossbolt safety in, but just look at that. I mean, that is so much more rugged. That is so much more universal. This is what it's for. It's function. And the aesthetics are amazing too. Look at that. That is awesome. So this is probably the strongest part of actually the Sub-2000 now. Oh, it feels good too. Man. All right, we're in there. So what we need to do to put the crossbolt safety in is we need to go ahead and get a little bit of leverage under that hammer. So the hammer's forward right now. So go ahead and just stick your medium-sized punch in there. All right, and you can see the hammer sticking up. And then take a wooden dowel, or if you've got an old toothbrush in your cleaning kit, that'll work too. You just want something non-abrasive, and you're going to go ahead and just work that hammer back. It's under a lot of tension. You heard that lock? That's when you know you're in business. All right, so it locked in place. We're going to go ahead and turn it upright. Now the idea is you want the fire side, the red side, on the right. So we're going to put it right here, okay? Now it's not going all the way in because that trigger bar is on the other, is in front of it. So we go in through the other side with our punch and we lift up. You've got to kind of fish around, you'll feel it, and you lift up and then it slides right in and it's on both sides now. Now, without pushing it all the way through, you got to be a little delicate here. Now we're going to go ahead and take the detent and we're going to insert that into the hole. Make sure the spring's in there. You can see my spring's already in there. Once the detent is in the hole, take your razor blade and just push down on it delicately. You don't want to scratch your polymer. And then the idea is to not go too far, but just enough so that you're right under the polymer on that hole there, and it holds it in place. See how it's holding itself in place? Then take your C-clip and you're going to insert that right on the little cutouts there. You kind of heard it clip twice. You want to make sure that it's definitely all the way on there. And then push it in. Alright, so it's locked in now. We're going to do the same on the fire side. Take your C-clip. Heard it clip twice. It's definitely in there. That's what we want. Now let's reassemble the rest of the Sub-2000. Go ahead and insert the collar onto the receiver, crank it down. It's suggested too that you use some blue Loctite. That'll help keep it in place. Go ahead and take the bolt, reinsert that. Make sure you line up that hole so that you can insert charging handle and then the recoil spring behind the charging handle. Then the buttstock. Then the buffer. It helps if you put the buffer pin in the hole underneath, and then you just press down. And it'll all go together like so. Now that the installation is complete, let's go ahead and perform a function check. Charge the rifle, place the weapon on safe, pull the trigger, nothing, awesome. Place it on fire, pull the trigger, perfect. Keep the trigger depressed, pull back on the charging handle, release the trigger. Hear that metallic click, that's good. Pull the trigger, excellent. Well, there you have it, guys, the KEL-TEC Sub-2000 machined aluminum trigger guard. Awesome. I hope you guys are just as excited about this upgrade as I am. I mean, I gotta tell you, we didn't even really think about this idea. You guys came up with it. You were asking when we were gonna do a machined aluminum trigger guard. I don't know why it just wasn't common sense for us, but hey, that's why we lean on you guys so much to give us your feedback and your help on what we're doing next and how we're gonna go about, you know, redesigning the Sub-2000, making it exactly what we want out of it. Look at that. Man, that is awesome. That's what we needed. Just so smooth, so simple, but a critical piece of equipment for the Sub-2000. I mean, you could almost use that as a hammer. Look at that. That thing is solid. Oh, I almost forgot. Let's look at the tolerances here real quick. So pushing it side to side, it doesn't even budge. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Hey guys, thank you for being a part of the MCARBO Brotherhood, supporting combat veterans who support military foundations and create innovative American parts. You guys are our inspiration and you keep us motivated. So hey, leave your comments, talk about these parts, keep corresponding with us, letting us know what you want to see next. We're really psyched about this and we hope you guys are too. Hey, take care of yourselves and as always, happy shooting.